This is Ray Mofield once again, and we're back with our traveling microphone for oral history here in Marshall County. And tonight I believe it's 105 West 9th Street, the home of Roy Boyd. Mr. and Mrs. Boyd have lived here for a good while. How long did you say you lived here?
About 50 years in this one place.
Uh-huh.
I've lived 76 years on this street.
Mrs. Boyd, your given name is Sylvia, is that right? And you've lived, how many, 70?
I've lived 76 years on this one street. It used to be Benton Street.
It seems to be home then.
Yes, sir. It takes a heap of living to make a house a home. We lived in this house about 50 years. We built it originally in 1935.
Are you a Marshall Countian? Were you born here?
I was born in the New Harmony community.
Uh-huh. And who were your parents?
My father was Hardy McGregor. My mother was Lucy Reeves McGregor. My grandfather at first I'll tell you, the McGregors came here from South Carolina, and my father was one of the 6 boys that came here from South Carolina. And the Reeves came here from Tennessee. Mm-hmm. And my grandfather on my mother's side was William Reeves. My grandparents was William Reeves and Johanna Elizabeth Bentley Reeves. My grandparents on my father's side was James Monroe McGregor and Gatley Gertrude Davis McGregor. Now, my daddy is a direct descendant of Jefferson Davis. He's always told us this, mm-hmm. that Jefferson Davis, and my daddy's grandfather, Albert Davis, were first cousins.
Mm-hmm. And, Jefferson Davis was born over in, I guess that's still Christian County there at Fairview. Anyway, it's not too far out of Hutchinsville.
Yeah, where the Elton
the big
monument,
the copy of the Washington Monument, which is 351 feet tall, as I recall, 355 or something like that. Beautiful place there. And, it's odd in a way that both presidents during the war between the states were born in Kentucky.
Well, that's good. Well, to me, Benton's the garden spot of the world. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else.
Well, what part of the county were you born?
New Harmony, down about 5 miles out. And my daddy's always told me this. Dr. Woodall rode a horse from the Woodall, you know where that Woodall farm is?
Yes, sir.
Rode a horse for saddleback and brought me into this world and charged him 75 cents.
I believe you're worth more than that.
Well, he's always told me that. It's quite a bit different from today, though, because I just had a new one, and I'm no new great-grand.
Now, who is your new great-grand? We'll get off the topic a minute, but we'll come back to that.
Well, my new great-grand is the son of Charlie Bryan and Phil Flat Bryan. Mm-hmm. Phil taught school several years here, and Charlie is an attorney for Levitt & Levitt. Mm-hmm. And the new baby's name is Martin Boyd Bryan. And they're going to call him Bo. Yeah. Now, I got that in, and if I had an interview, or you'd interviewed me, rather, several months ago, I would have got this in my history.
Well, it's a good thing I didn't come before I did.
Because he had just turned half weeks old.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Now, your parents, when did they come to Benton?
We moved to Benton in 1908. And my daddy came here to be deputy sheriff under Lewis Wallace. Mm-hmm. He served 4 years under Lewis Wallace, and then he served a part of time under Joe Donnell. And he was made the first marshal, and call him police now, of Benton. My daddy was.
Well, what an honor.
And I remember him being called to the courthouse, being called to town the night the courthouse burned. We lived about 2 blocks down the street from here. Mm-hmm. But as I say, I was 4 years old when I moved to Benton, and I've lived on this one street. I've really moved it 3 times in my life.
Mm-hmm. And it was all on the Bearden Street, or?
Moved from it, New Harmony up here.
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Well, there are not many people, I imagine, that could equal that kind of a record.
Well, I've been fortunate in having a good home and a good place to stay in.
Did you have any brothers and sisters in the family?
I had a brother, Guy McGregor. He passed away in 1960. And I have a sister, Ruby McGregor Castleberry. She was married to W.S. Castleberry, who is deceased.
Well, since you came that young in life, you probably went to school here.
I went to school here all of my life. I entered school here. My first teacher was Miss Minnie Kuykendall. First grade teacher was Miss Minnie Kuykendall. Then I had Miss Reba Heath, Miss Mamie Eads, and Miss Ada Donald Lyles, and Miss Reginald Pace. I think you said you knew her. She lived at Hardin.
Yes, I remember. She was what did we call them? Cashier in the bank or something like that?
Yeah. And then my high school teachers were Clyde Philbeck. I sort of believe he came from Hardin, didn't he? Or do you remember?
I believe that's
His sister
true.
married Youngblood up there.
Yes, Pearl Philbeck married Clyde Youngblood.
And I always had a funny tale about her. Elma Rowe, she was in our class, and we had to answer the roll call to the quotation. She couldn't think of one, and Elma Rowe said, well, say, hitch your wagon to a star and drive, drive, drive. Of course, that wasn't English, that part. Well, when she answered that, she was so proud of herself, she said, hitch your wagon to a star and drive, drive, drive. Well, that just, everybody just hollered. I didn't even have that written down to tell you about it, but I just happened to think about it.
I remember Pearl and Clyde's children. Let's see, there was I was on the Hardin debate team, and one was named Phil, about a year behind me, and then the older boy was Joe Taylor, Youngblood.
I didn't know them. I just remembered her.
They operated the garage in Hardin, at least when I knew them.
Well, then one of the highlights of my high school career was we had a teacher, Miss Hilda Aaron Height. So she put on a play here, and it must have been so good, I don't remember, but anyway, we were invited to Hardin to put that play on in Hardin School. We had to go on a train, had to stay all night in a hotel in Hardin. I think you said it was the
Warren Hotel. I remember it well.
Of course, we had to come home, but that was all of that was the most fun to us, going away from home and staying in a hotel. First time I'd ever done anything like that. So that was the highlight.
And riding the train, that's a big thrill, always was to me.
That's the only way we had to get around. The roads were so bad. And then I graduated in 1923, and then went on to Bowling Green. It's a normal school then, I think, and I sort of believe Murray was being built then Monday.
It started in 1906 and was a normal school, and then Murray, of course, was authorized in 22 and opened in 23.
It was being built when I went up there.
In fact, they didn't even have the building finished in 23. They met in the old Murray High School building for that first year.
Well, and of course, I didn't go very long. I got my teacher's certificate and came back home and taught school at Brownsburg, my first school at Brownsburg in 1923 and 24. Of course, we were paid back then on the amount of students we had. I think I made about $64 a month. Thought that was awful good money, first money I'd ever made.
64? Well, that sounds like a lot.
I think we were paid back then according to the number of students you had enrolled. And they told me when I went over there that they sort of had taken advantage of the teachers, and I'd have to start off kind of stern or get my bluff in on them. So I whipped 9 boys one day for slipping off and going to a wheat thresher. After that, I had pretty good conduct.
You let them know you meant business.
And some of the children that went to school with me at Brownsburg were the Greenfield children, and the Macwaters boys, the Mobleys, and the Carnes. And of course, Albert Carnes was, I think he was an attorney. He's retired now.
Yes, I remember him.
He was so studious, and I was so afraid he'd ask me something I didn't know. I really learned more when I taught school than I did when I went to school, because I studied my lessons. Every day, the day before, I was afraid Albert was going to ask me to solve a problem or something I didn't know how. So then...
that's great. Now, did I hear you say that you went to school part of the time with Ezra Blumenberg?
Yes, he graduated the year before I did. He graduated in 1922. But I didn't graduate until 23.
Yes.
And then I went on down to Stall, a few miles down the road, the next year, and taught school at Stall. And some of the students that went there were the Homer Solomon up here. It's one of them, and the Drafen children, and the Chumler boys, Orvis and Ray and Robert and William Wesley, and then R.A. Faust and Kate Faust. Oh, this
William Wesley was my teacher at Hardin.
Oh, you're making me feel so old. Yeah, he had 5 brothers, and he was the 6th one. They all went to school. And I didn't like teaching too well, so I took a business course at Miss Dorian's private school in Paducah. I went back and forth on the train.
I remember Miss Marion Doran, I believe her name.
Yeah, she was the daughter. Mrs. Dorian, I don't remember her first name, I believe it was Kate. But anyway, after that I didn't get that through with my course, I was hired as a secretary for the Prudential Insurance Company. And I worked there for 4 years till I married Roy Boyd in 1929.
Well, I was going to ask you when you married. So it was 29. Everything was booming, but before the year ended,
it was during the Depression. We always
had an inkling of a depression. Didn't we? Black Thursday came on, I believe it was October the 29th.
Well, I don't recall.
Stock market lost $10 billion and so on. And then 30, 31, 32, 33, we had real rough times.
Yes, my son, let's see, my son, Bob Boyd, was born in 1930. And my daughter, Judy Boyd Flatt, was born in 1933. And Bob lives on 18th Street. I think he used to live at home.
Oh, yes, lived right almost, well, Miss Darnell was between us, but we were almost side by side.
And Judy, of course, lives next door with her family. I have 3 grandchildren. As I've just told you about, the first one was Phil, who has the new baby. And then Fran Flatt, she works in Paducah at the Spouse Abuse Center as assistant director. And then, of course, I have one grandson, Stephen Boyd Flatt. He is now 14 years old, and he is 6 feet 5 1/2 inches tall and weighs about 195 pounds.
How old is he?
14.
14. Well, now he'll be the center on the basketball team.
He's been playing football. We went to see him the last game Tuesday night. He likes football really better than he does basketball, but I hope he'll play basketball because I don't know anything about football except when they make a touchdown. And I saw him make my first live touchdown. I didn't really care much about football. First game I went to, he made a touchdown. Of course, that thrilled me good.
Well, of course. Certainly it would. Well, can you tell us anything about the changes you've seen around the Benton business district?
Yeah, I won't get to that in a minute, but first I'm going to tell you about this lot.
All right.
Roy bought this lot from the Stilly heirs. It was full of ditches. When I went to school, I walked in ditches over my head up through here. And when they remodeled the elementary school, we bought the dirt to fill up these ditches for 10 cents a wagon load, and Levi Borland hauled the dirt and filled up the ditches. We bought a fourth of this square for practically nothing. And previous to our acquiring it, used to be a show come to town, and they would put their tent up there. It was a talking movie show, A-Lot show. He would show the movie, and then he'd talk off. We didn't have any hearing at home. He would talk and tell us what was going on. And then later on Tater Day, everybody would put their horses and mules and wagons up there. And then, of course, after we get settled, after the ground settled and so forth, we built here in 1935. And
do you remember an old show that it was a stage show that came around every year called Bisbee's Comedian?
Oh yes, it was over on about the lot where the Bank of Marshall County is now. Then one time, I can't tell you too much about this, but there used to be a Chautauqua that would come up on the school grounds. It came about 2 summers, I remember. This is a little more high-class show than...
Yes.
I don't remember too much about it. I just remember the name and going. And then you said about uptown, I haven't heard all your reports, and I might be repeating, but...
well, that doesn't really matter if we repeat some.
The building, which is known to modern day as the Morgan Heath that recently burned uptown.
Yes, sir.
It was formerly, back when I remember, owned by Uncle Bill Nack McGregor, and it was known as McGregor Hardware. We have some furniture in the family now that has McGregor Hardware stamped on the back of it. And they lived right up the street here. And that was before Morgan and Heath. And then south of it, on Main Street, was once the post office and once the Tribune office.
Yes.
They've been moved several times since then. And
I found an old photograph that showed the post office there, which I never knew that was true. I do remember, of course, when the Tribune was there.
mm-hmm. And then I don't know if anybody's ever told this about the Methodist Church being up here on Olive Street.
No, I don't remember ever hearing that.
Well, when we first moved here on the corner of 13th and Olive, which is now known as Miss Maud Williams' house.
Yes.
The Methodist Church was originally there. And when they moved to their present location, Noah Mathis put in a theater there. And that was the first theater I remember in Benton.
Well, as far as I had ever heard before, people said, well, the Methodist Church was always there. But, of course, always is a long time.
And that's a long time ago, but it was originally there. And then on the Court Square, where the City Hall is now, it was a very pretty building. And Solon Palmer, have you ever heard that? Solon Palmer lived there.
That name appears in all of the Marshall County histories.
Well, he was the president of the Bank of Benton then, and the Bank of Benton then was located where Lovett's office is.
Yes.
And Solon Palmer lived in this house where the City Hall is now. And I think it was later turned into the Methodist Parsonage. I think the last people I remember living in that last Methodist picture was Brother Fowler. He has a daughter here, Mrs. Van Roberts.
Mrs. Van Roberts? Well, yeah.
I think they lived in that. I think they were still Methodist Parsonage then, I'm not sure, but it used to be Methodist Parsonage. And do you ever remember a big bell being up in the courthouse yard that was used as a fire alarm?
I don't remember that.
Big iron bell up in the courthouse yard. And they rang that when we had a fire. And my daddy had his first grandchild up there one time, Barbara Franklin. And she rang that bell. Of course, all the businesses ran out on the street to see what the fire was. She says she remembers Pont Nelson and his father running out. She was little, but she remembers them. And
false alarm.
Yeah. And then Clay Donald mentioned the hotel, being where the National Store is now.
Yes.
That was run by Miss Belle King-Solomon, and she was the mother of the late George and John Ed and Gretchen Long. And she later married a King-Solomon and had twin daughters, Mildred and Nettie. We went to school. I went to school with them, and they lived in that hotel uptown, and so I envied them because they lived uptown in a hotel.
And you lived way off down here.
Yeah. And then, I don't think this would have been mentioned, across the street from the hotel, where the federal loan is now, was a hotel. It was formerly Judge Price's home. And Uncle Jim McDaniel run that as a hotel back about a long time ago. I think Roy has said that he took some meals there. Anybody could eat there that wanted to. And then there's another business that I think I heard somebody mention this, though. On the corner where the Bank of Marshall County is now, Mr. Cross printed the Tribune one time. And then between that building and where Miss Georgia Bowman's house is was a big white house. That was occupied by Dobie Landrum and his wife, Miss Annie, and he ran the first Ford agency that I remember, and it was located in where Phillips Chevrolet is now. Then later, Mr. and Miss Horace Riley lived in that house and ran a hotel there. They are the father of Chloe Jane Riley Hardesty. Father and mother, rather, parents. And I believe most of the other businesses around the square have been mentioned, except I heard Gladys talk about the Barnes, T.E. Barnes, and the Roy Griffith store that was located where the Hauser store is. They used to make hats, have a millinery shop up on that balcony. And Mrs. Eads, she was the mother of Miss Nanny Eads, that was one of my teachers, made hats. And later, Miss Addie Hayden Griffith worked there. And
Did you always try to get a new bonnet for Big Singing Day?
Oh, I was going to tell you about that. On Big Singing Day, we had to have a new dress. And everybody had to meet the train. You see, all that just came in the train loads back then. And then, yes, Big Singing, the yard was full of people, and most of the time it'd be hot. You couldn't hardly get through the courthouse yard then for people. And I ate my first ice cream cone on Big Singing Day. But I believe that was before I moved to
Was
Benton.
it expensive?
Well, I don't know what the first one cost, but I remember they were just a nickel, and then if you'd save your money late in the afternoon, they'd be 2 for a nickel.
2 for a nickel. That's great.
Yes. And then I was going to tell you, on down north from the hotel, I don't believe anybody's mentioned these businesses. Clay Darnold mentioned P.B. Sun, but I think it was down this way. P.B. Sun had a bakery and a butcher shop. And then Jim Johnson had a mill on down.
Made cornmeal, maybe flour.
And then around the corner where the Bank of Benton is now, there was a blacksmith shop operated by Billy Wilkerson. And he had the first Ford that I ever remember being in Benton. I was going to tell you about Mr. Palmer. Let's back up a little bit. He had the first car I ever rode in. And he'd drive up and down the street in the afternoon, and we kids would stand on the side of the street and say, "Oh, Mr. Palmer, let's ride." He would stop and take us for a ride. And that's the first car I ever rode in. And, of course, like I said, Billy Wilkerson had the first Ford that I remember of. And I developed trachoma, which is now known as my everyday name. It's a granulated leaves in my eyes. And Dr. Washburn wanted me to go to Purdue to have the operation, but he didn't want me to ride on the train because I wanted to get some cinders in my eyes. So my daddy hired this Billy Wilkerson to take us in this Ford. And the roads were so bad, it took so long to go there. And I know you've heard of Salyers Hill, haven't you?
Yes, sir.
Well, I've always heard it. They had to really give it the gas to get up that Salyers Hill. So that was one of the things I remember. And
yeah, it's all rolled down, didn't you?
I was going to something back there I thought of. We talked about your father-in-law. I went to school with him. And something I'd like to mention. Is the time about up?
We've got about 2 minutes.
Well, I'd like to mention some of my classmates that aren't dead.
Good.
There may be some more of them, but these are Marianne Jones, Marvel Tyree Smith, Reba Treese Moeller, Miranda Young. She lives in Paducah. And Eugene Griffith and Carl Bohannon. Now, Eugene Griffith was at the last Big Singing. I think you remember seeing him.
I remember that. Yes.
He was one of I graduated with him. And there may be some others that live in, but they're the only ones I know of.
Well, it brings back a lot of memories to...
I'd like to mention something else right quick. I was aimed to ask you about it before we started. Washoe County was once part of Callaway County, wasn't it?
Yes, ma'am, it was, till 1842.
All right, when they separated, Roy's father, Alfred Boyd from Trigg County, was one of the commissioners that helped establish the line.
I remember reading that.
It hasn't, not too long ago, it's in the paper. I mean, I couldn't find it to tell exactly, but I
didn't know he was related to Mr. Boyd.
was Roy's father, Alfred Boyd. Roy was born in Trigg County, and all of his folks lived there.
Very good. Well, you have put on a sterling performance.
Now I beat you tonight. I've really done all the talking.
The guest is supposed to do all the talking.
I didn't intend to, but I didn't know I was taking up that much time either.
Well, that's wonderful. We appreciate all the effort you've put into it and your gracious invitation to visit. It's good to see you and Mr. Boyd still in a lovely home and still able to enjoy life.
My motto is keep on keeping on. I'm not still a minute. I just keep on keeping on. Now, Roy doesn't get around too good, but he's in good health. He's 88 years old.
Very fine, and thank you so much, Mrs. Roy Boyd, Sylvia, her given name. She was a McGregor. That's all the time we have for oral history today. This is Ray Mofield returning you to our studios in Benton.